Welcome to the Wellness That Fits podcast, where we help busy moms eat well, restore energy, and clear brain fog without sacrificing family time or your sanity. I'm Cassie Groeschl, registered dietitian and mom of 3. I believe wellness should fit your real life, not the other way around. If you're tired of complicated wellness trends and want simple, sustainable strategies for meal prep, holistic nutrition, and time-saving routines, you're in the right place. Let's jump in. Hey guys, welcome back to the Wellness That Fits podcast. Today, we are going to talk about one of my favorite hobbies, and that is gardening. And I want to switch the focus a little bit today to thinking about what if your garden wasn't just food, but a daily prescription for your brain. I know a lot of the women I work with experience brain fog, anxiety, trouble concentrating, low energy, burnout at times, and they're having issues at sometimes, and maybe some nervous system dysregulation or stress resilient difficulty. And so what I want to do today is reframe this gardening idea, and that what if it was more than just a garden? What if your backyard was a nervous system support system? How cool would that be? And so I started thinking about this because I know a lot of us now are planting our gardens, and I live in Wisconsin. And so we still have very cold weather at the time of this recording. And so I am zone 5B. And usually we can't even start planting until May. And so I still get excited in March and April to start planting my garden. And so I was really thinking about this idea that I had to have this optimized brain garden. So basically create a garden that has foods that are specifically targeted for brain health. And so I have been gardening just about a decade, and I've tried a lot of different things. I've tried cucumbers for pickling and regular fresh cucumbers, tomatoes, broccoli, cauliflower, purple cauliflower, a lot of different herbs, basil, oregano, sage, marjoram, a lot of different of those herbs. I've definitely experimented a lot with gardening, and I want to really target my garden this year on some of those really specific brain health foods. So today we're going to talk about a little bit of like, what is a brain garden and what could we put in it? Why are these foods good for brain health? How can we use these foods in culinary applications or in the kitchen? Okay, but first we're going to start with a quick science primer. So when we talk about brain health, we're really looking at, and especially brain health as it pertains to peak functioning and also mental health. So there's a lot of research behind increasing plant intake and decreasing anxiety, depression, and other mental health disorders. And also not even just a diagnosable disorder, but also just creating more calm and a more regulated nervous system. And so part of that is understanding the gut-brain axis. So your gut-brain axis, you've probably heard of it before. It is a two-way communication system between your gut and your brain, largely driven by the vagus nerve and your gut microbiome. And so the communication is bidirectional, meaning it's going from your brain to your gut and your gut to your brain. However, the majority of it is going from your gut to your brain, those communication signals. And another thing to keep in mind is that your gut bacteria, and everybody's is different. Everybody has a different population. Even throughout your own life, you might have different populations in your gut, but your gut bacteria produce neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and GABA, meaning your mood, anxiety levels, and even focus are directly influenced by what's happening in your digestive system. Your gut bacteria are producing these metabolites like butyrate, which are short-chain fatty acids, and those are impacting and influencing your mood, what's happening in your brain. So mood, anxiety levels, and even your focus is directly influenced with what is happening in your digestive system. And also something to keep in mind, when your gut is inflamed or imbalanced, it can send stress signals to the brain, contributing to anxiety, fatigue, and brain fog. And so there is a huge component of that gut brain axis that we can impact with nutrition, of course. Like it's more than just digestion, right? It is feeding the bacteria that make a huge impact on the rest of our systems. Another thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about today is inflammation. And so when we can eat an anti-inflammatory diet, we can decrease inflammation in our body because inflammation impacts anxiety, fatigue, low energy levels. And then lastly, nutrient density. I know a lot of people are planting gardens because our food systems and in agriculture, the food isn't necessarily as nutrient dense as it used to be. And so how we can support that a little bit within our own homes, if we can, if we have the ability to, is to plant a garden and to grow our own food. And we have a little bit more control over the soil that it's put in, a little bit. I'm not saying complete control. Organic farmers don't even have complete control over the soil, but at least we can control that a little bit. We can control, not putting pesticides and herbicides and things on our food. So typically, if you grow your own food and if you do so in good soil and you're following all the right steps, you can create and grow nutrient dense foods. So we're not just growing food. What we're doing is we're growing the things that are really important for brain health, like antioxidants, polyphenols, sulforaphanes, or at least the precursor to sulforaphanes, because sulforaphanes are produced when the plant, let's say veggie, is cut into or the cells are exposed to air. So there's also nervine herbs, which are plants that support and regulate the nervous system, helping calm anxiety, improve stress resilience, and support better sleep without being sedating like some medications might be. So it really just can produce more of a calm effect on the body. So you can take these herbs throughout the day, but if you wanted a little bit more support right before bed, like your thoughts are going to be racing, or you have maybe a little bit more anxiety before you go to bed, or anxiety about not sleeping, some of these herbs can improve that ability to fall asleep and just calm your nerves down. So again, you can approach sleep in a more calm mood. Okay, so what are the plants I'm going to talk about today? I am going to talk about lemon balm. It's an herb. I'm going to talk about leafy greens, a few different kinds, of course, that you can grow. I'm going to be talking about brain boosting herbs. Raspberries is another one, and sulforaphane superstars. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how to grow these and then how to apply this and how to actually use them in your kitchen. All right, so starting first with lemon balm, I have grown to love this herb. The university around me has a plant sale every year, and I had purchased a few different herbs for the calming purpose. And it is a perennial, and so I have been able to just not have to replant it, and so it just keeps coming back. So what is lemon balm? Lemon balm, the calm down plant, reduces anxiety and improves mood. It supports cognitive function and sleep. And it helps take the edge off stress by supporting the nervous system rather than forcing sedation. And so how do we use this? I will say it grows somewhat like a weed. It really can take over. And so I would probably grow it in either a container or you could grow it in a contained space, I would say. So I actually have 3 garden beds. They're like 8 feet by 4 feet wide, and I grow it on one side of my 8x4. So it's in like a 4x4 area. And it does keep it a little bit contained, but holy cow, it's like growing through the slats of my garden bed. And it definitely has shown up in other places in our yard. So I mean, it's like mint. If you've ever grown mint, mint is basically like grows like a weed and spreads like a weed, I should say. Of course, not a weed, but so just something to keep in mind that if you are going to grow lemon balm, to keep it somewhat contained. And so how you can use it is you could use it fresh. You could steep some of the fresh leaves in tea. You just have to steep the leaves for like 5 to 10 minutes. What I typically do, I mean, during the summer when it is producing at its best, I will harvest multiple times. That thing produces, my little bush produces a huge amount. And so I am like cutting off full branches. They're more like skinny branches, but I'm cutting off bundles and I'm hanging them in a cool, dark place. And then once they're fully dried, I'll take off the leaves and I will crumble them up and ensure that they're dried because you don't want any mold growing on it. And then I will put it in a glass container and then I'll be able to use it throughout the year. Again, what I'm mostly using it for is just steeping it in a mesh container for tea. Typically, I will make lemon balm tea while I'm putting the kids down for bed, or like maybe during bath time, I'll start drinking it so that I can kind of start winding down. Or you could, if you have anxiety or certain times of the day that make you really anxious, you could take it at different times of the day. I just really like to take it before bed for that calming action and for its sleep promoting qualities. There are other ways to use it. I actually made lemon balm blueberry muffins. Those were really good. They're named lemon balm for a reason. They smell very citrusy. And so you could chop these fresh leaves up and use it any way in which you might grate lemon. Anywhere where you'd want like a lemon flavor, you could chop them up finely and put them in baked goods, in salads, in a number of different places. So it's a really versatile leaf. But again, I'm mostly using the dried leaves for tea. Again, you can use the fresh leaves for tea too. Just a couple growing tips. So I had mentioned this before. They're a perennial, so they do come back yearly without having to replant. It thrives in partial sun. One of my garden beds is mostly shaded or shaded for half the day, I would say. And then I have one that's kind of half and half and one that's mostly full sun. And so you want to kind of figure out where your plants are going to be best situated in terms of sun, but the lemon balm plant does thrive in partial sun. So you don't want full sun and you don't want full shade. And again, like I said, this can spread. So you might want to plant in a corner or a container or somewhere where it can be contained. So the growing tips that I am going to be talking about today are mostly for my own zone 5B in Wisconsin. The next one I want to talk about leafy greens. I have had so much good success with Swiss chard. Swiss chard is one of my favorite leafy greens. It is so nutrient dense. Swiss chard is actually one of the plants that NASA has researched and like is part of like the plan to grow it in space or somewhere where you don't have a lot of like growing room and you need a very nutrient dense plant. I forget exactly how it is, but so it's a very nutrient dense plant, even more so. I mean, spinach is great, kale is great, right? Swiss chard is super easy to grow and it is very nutrient dense. So that kind of makes it a great plant to grow. I have grown the rainbow chard and I've also grown the peppermint chard. And basically it's just like how the stem looks. The stem in the rainbow chard is like greens and yellows and purples and reds. And the peppermint chard is like pinks and reds and whites. That all taste relatively the same, just a little bit of different colors and varieties, and probably with the different colors come slightly different antioxidants. So a couple benefits with Swiss chard would be magnesium. They're a good source of magnesium, and magnesium helps with stress reduction. Folate helps with brain health and mood, and it helps support detox and just overall energy. So something really great about leafy greens, and I talked about this in one of the first 5 episodes that I recorded on the Wellness That Fits podcast. But one of the greatest things is that out of Rush University, they studied leafy greens and they studied the Mediterranean diet. It was in 2018, and like almost 1,000 adults, 960 adults. And the average age was around 80 for almost 5 years. They followed them. And what they found was that people who ate just one serving of leafy greens a day, like spinach, kale, lettuce, had the memory and cognitive function of someone who is 11 years younger than those who rarely ate greens. So 11 years is quite a lot. That's like your brain aging being slowed dramatically just by adding greens to your plate daily, which I think is super promising and super empowering, in that we can change our brain health by simply eating a serving of leafy greens once a day. So how could we actually use Swiss chard, right? It's one thing to grow it, which is pretty easy. What do we do with it? So I love to saute it with garlic and olive oil. You can actually eat the stem. The stem kind of looks like celery, and then also the leaf. You can freeze it for winter use. I make these Swiss chard balls. They basically what it is you chop everything up, chop the stems up, boil it just for like a minute, blanch it. So put it in ice water just to stop the cooking process. And then you form it into balls. You squeeze out all the liquid from the cold water, you form it into balls, and then you put that ball of leafy greens onto a sheet pan, stick it in the freezer, let it freeze for like 20 minutes, half hour, and then throw those little Swiss chard balls into a freezer safe bag or freezer safe container. And then you have these perfect little balls, like serving size, that you can throw into a soup or just let it thaw for a little bit, chop up even finer and put it into casseroles and soups. I personally like to use it in my Swiss chard bean sausage soup. It just brings a lot of flavor. It's more of like a bitter, dark green. And so pairing it with other strong flavors is really a good idea. I tend to freeze most of it. I'll saute a little bit of it fresh, but I tend to freeze most of it. I've used it in smoothies. Not the best. I prefer spinach or kale, but you certainly could try it in smoothies. But I tend to use it in soups and stews, and also I eat it fresh. If you were to eat it in a salad fresh, it does pair best with, because of its bitterness, it does pair best with strong flavors. Like you could do craisin, goat cheese, red onion, Swiss chard salad. That would be really a good pairing. And yeah, and then some growing tips. It's very productive in small spaces, and it's a cut and come again harvesting style. So you just cut off what you need. I usually cut off the outside pieces, and then it starts to grow back. Don't cut down the middle. Usually that piece needs to keep growing. And it's cold tolerant, so it's great for Wisconsin. It's great for the Midwest. I usually plant 2 or 3. Sometimes I plant 4 and then only like 3 come up. So 3 is plenty, especially if you're staying on top of it and harvesting. You could probably produce enough for the soups and stews that you need throughout the year. Okay, so that is a leafy green that I absolutely love. I actually have done 2 different varieties of kale, and I do really like kale. Kale and spinach are what I use in my blueberry greens protein smoothie, like, every other morning, and so I go through a lot of kale and spinach, and so one thing that I really like about kale is that it has, the ability to produce, sulforaphanes, and so it's a sulforaphane-rich leafy green, if you will. So I'll talk more about that later. But kale would be another leafy green that I have grown, and that grows really easy. It's very hardy, and you can eat it fresh. You can make kale chips. You can use it in soup, stews, salads, and smoothies. It's super, super versatile. All right, so we're going to move on to the next thing, some brain boosting herbs. This was a hard one to do because I don't feel like there's any really specific herb that I would say, oh my gosh, this is the best herb for your brain. It's more like herbs in general are high antioxidants, and they're just overall very potent sources of antioxidants. And so they're just really great. A couple I listed here, mostly because they're just super easy to grow. And as a busy mom, I can't be finicking with things that are very hard to grow or that take too much of my time or they need extra nurturing. Like I just don't have time for it. And so these things are what I found to be really easy to grow and still very antioxidant rich. So basil, that's one. Oregano, sage, those are really easy to grow herbs. Basil is anti-inflammatory, can support mood. What I like to use it for is in salads and caprese salads and any sort of Italian dish and pasta and things like that. But what I like to do is make pesto. And so I'll get basil in bulk and wash everything, strip off the leaves, and then I will make pesto, but it's not normal pesto. What I do is I make a walnut, basil, pecorino romano, olive oil pesto. And so if you're familiar with pesto, usually the ingredients are pine nuts, basil, a little bit of olive oil, and Parmesan cheese. And I like Parmesan cheese, but I love pecorino romano cheese. It's very similar. It's a hard cheese, but also has a higher ALA content. But what's different about it is that it's made from sheep's milk. I really like the flavor. And so I will make my pesto with that, and I'll use either pumpkin seeds or walnuts as instead of pine nuts. Now, of course, the texture is going to be a little bit different, but I really like using walnuts because it has a higher omega-3 content. And I like using pumpkin seed also. The pumpkin seeds are super high in a lot of different micronutrients like iron and magnesium and zinc. And so I really like making my pesto with those things too. So pesto is nice because you can just freeze it in little jars, pint jars or 1 cup jars, and pull it out whenever you want to make a pasta or you want to do chicken pesto or chicken pesto paninis. By freezing it, you're basically locking in all the flavor and a lot of the antioxidant content remains. And so it's just like a really great sauce pesto to use for in the kitchen. And so basil, I talked about that. Oregano, high antioxidant potency as well. It is naturally antimicrobial, and so it does have a little bit of immune supportive effects. And you can use it fresh, of course, but usually what I do is I dry it. That way I can use it year round. And I have a little drying space where I hang my herbs from like a hanger or like clothespin or somewhere in my house where it's getting a lot of good airflow. And so that's oregano. And then another one that's super easy to grow and high in antioxidants is sage. And there's actually a little bit more of cognitive support related to sage with memory and focus. It's actually traditionally used for brain aging. And so you can use sage in teas. But what I mostly use it for is I dry it. You have to make sure it's dry because it's kind of like a thick leaf. So make sure all the liquid is out of it before you grind it up and put it in a jar and seal it because it could get moldy. And so I'm mostly using it when I bake a whole chicken. I'll make a sage, salt, butter mixture and put it underneath the skin of the chicken to then roast it. And then I have a whole bunch of meat that I can use from a whole chicken, and then I can make bone broth after. So that would be the main ways in which I use sage. Of course, I use it in other stews and soups and stuff too, but that's what I like about it. All right. And so just like one key point is that herbs are concentrated medicine in small doses. Many culinary herbs are also mild adaptogenic in effect. And so it helps the body handle stress more efficiently over time. Just a quick few growing tips, especially for zone 5B. Basil is an annual, and so you do have to replant it yearly. Oregano and sage, those are perennials. And for my garden, at least, sage has come back really well. Oregano, not so much. So I think it kind of depends on the growing conditions and, how your garden overwinters and things like that. And so you may need to replant some of those. But all those herbs really need full sun, well-drained soil. And so, keep that in mind when you're planning your garden and in placement of those herbs. I would say for planting amount, like enough for a kitchen and drying. I mean, obviously it depends on how much you're using these herbs, but I feel like even 2 basil plants and 1 oregano and 1 sage plant would be sufficient for our family. I probably have 6 of the sage plants because sometimes they're kind of small. Some of them grow really well. Some of them are small because they're growing next to my lemon balm. And so I should note, I should have said this in the beginning. I am not a gardening expert. I have gardened for a while, but it definitely doesn't make me an expert. And I definitely am learning over the years what to do and not to do. And so if there's a listener on here and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she said to plant this next to it. Listen, I am not saying I have all the answers by any means. I'm not a horticulturist and understand which plants pair best with another and, all of that stuff. I know that you should plant marigolds on your corners of your garden to help the tomatoes, but I don't know everything there is to know about gardening. So I'm just sharing with you what I do know. And so take it with, a grain of salt. This is just based on my own experience gardening. But anyway, the sage doesn't come up as well if my lemon balm plant, which is crazy big, is suffocating it. And so I do have a few more sage plants on the corners. And so it really depends on how big your sage plant is and how many of them you have and how it's growing, how well it's growing and how big it is. So it kind of experiment with some of these things. Gardening is always an experiment, and even something that grows well one year may not grow well the next year. I've had plenty of those experiences. And so none of these things are like fast and hard rules. It's more of just tips. All right, so moving on, after herbs, we're going to talk about raspberries. Now, I will say I have actually not grown raspberries, but this is something that I want to grow this year. So raspberries and other berries in general are rich in polyphenols. And polyphenols are plant compounds that feed beneficial gut bacteria and they reduce inflammation. So wherever we can get polyphenols in our diet, great for gut health. Also, raspberries are super fibrous. There's like 8 grams of fiber in a cup of raspberries. And so, but very high in fiber. So it's really nice to get like a good big handful of these and like hit your quite a few grams of your fiber. And that fiber supports your gut even further. So the polyphenols support your gut. And then also the fiber in the raspberries support your gut. And then those polyphenols and the antioxidants do support your brain function, reduces oxidative stress. And again, like I said, it really creates a good gut microbiome support. I've talked about blueberries a lot, and usually that's the berry that is in my smoothie because of its research around executive functioning. But the reason I say raspberries, I want to add raspberries to my garden this year is because it's easier to grow, at least in Wisconsin. It's just blueberries are a little bit more picky with their growing conditions. And that's the reason why I don't want to, or I haven't grown them myself yet. And maybe I will down the road. But I think raspberries is a good starter to berries, although I know it takes a couple of years really to get raspberries going, to get a good patch going. And so I am going to add a trellis and room for raspberries to grow. So how do we use it? Fresh eating. That's the majority of the way I can envision my family eating is just eating it fresh. Kids getting to pick it outside while they're playing in the summer is just awesome. But you can, of course, make like jams and jellies, and you can also freeze for winter smoothies, to be able to use it in the wintertime, which I would do if I had a giant raspberry patch, but I don't envision that happening for a while yet. So we'll probably just be using the raspberries for fresh eating. Growing tips, perennial. And so they prefer their own space. So it shouldn't be put in a raised bed ideally. And so, like I said, I have 3 raised beds, but I'm going to be planning a space for them not in the raised bed and where they can grow off of a trellis. And like I said, they thrive in Wisconsin climate. There's a lot of wild growing raspberries all over in Wisconsin at least. And so they do thrive well here and they're pretty hardy. All right. The next thing I want to talk about is sulforaphane superstars. Okay. So when I talk about sulforaphane, before I talk about the actual veggies, I want to talk about why sulforaphane matters. If this is the first time you're hearing that word, let me explain a little bit more. If not, won't hurt to have a little refresher. All right, so why does it matter? Sulforaphane is a powerful sulfur-containing compound formed when cruciferous veggies are chopped or chewed. It's like raw veggies chewed in your mouth, or they're on a cutting board, you chop it, let it sit for a second, and then this sulforaphane is created. It's formed. It activates the NRF2 pathway, which is essential for your body's master switch for turning on antioxidant defenses and detoxification enzymes. So this means that it helps your body neutralize toxins. It helps reduce chronic inflammation. And it basically, what those things do is really protect brain cells from damage. And so overall, what does all the science mean? It can support brain detox. It promotes gut health by reducing inflammation and supporting a healthier microbiome environment. And it can even help with hormone balance. And where do we find these sulforaphane compounds? Well, it's formed after usually a veggie is chopped or chewed. A lot of times it's in cruciferous veggies, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, those sorts of things. Looking at some of the gold standard research, it's one of the most researched compounds for longevity and neuroprotection. And so that's why it's kind of on the radar of a lot of gut health and also brain health. That's why it matters. So what plants are we going to talk about? Kale, bok choy, and cabbage, and more specifically, a red or purple cabbage. Okay. So I had mentioned previously that I've grown kale. It grows really well. It's very hardy, especially in the Midwest. And so that one's easy to grow. And what's really cool about kale is that, well, not only being anti-inflammatory and has antioxidant properties that activate the NRF2 pathways, gene pathways, but freezing kale can boost sulforaphane content by up to 400. So if you are mostly growing kale and you want to eat it fresh in salads, great. For me, what I usually do is a small portion of it is eaten fresh or sauteed. What I am doing is usually harvesting the kale, washing it, blanching it, freezing it so that I can use it in smoothies, which is perfect to increase the sulforaphane content in kale. And so other ways to optimize it, light cooking, maybe like stir frying, just cooking it really quickly, preserves the compounds the best. Kind of like with a lot of other cooking, like the longer it sits in heat, probably the more breakdown you'll have of some of those nutrients and other compounds that are beneficial to health. And so just kind of think of really quick ways like light cooking or really low heat applications, low temperature blanching before freezing. Like I said, that really enhances the availability of the sulforaphane. And so, um, it's just one of those things that is just super beneficial for our health, and even more so with the sulforaphane compound. And so how you prepare your food matters as much as what you grow. So I love that the tip of the freezing, because it's like, okay, how you're actually preparing it, it matters too. It's not just like the foods that we're growing, but it's like, how are we preserving it and how are we preparing it? Okay, so that is kale. Oh, how to use kale. You chop it in some sort of way, right? Like chewing it also activates it. But when you chop it and let it sit, you're actually allowing it to activate even further. So that would be one way to use it. Of course, freezing it, right? Putting it in soup stews, put it in smoothies, stir fry it, lightly steam it, possibly. That would try to keep some of the nutrients intact. Growing tips for zone B5 again. It's a cool weather crop, so it's going to grow probably best in spring and fall. Succession planting is recommended, and you might want to protect it from cabbage worms. So you can use like row covers. I got to be honest, I didn't really do too much of that protection when I grew it last, but I know there were one portion of my plant that did get eaten up, mostly not from cabbage worms. It was those little Asian beetle things that are super annoying in Wisconsin. Some years they're terrible and some years they're okay. And so, there are different covers and things that you can use for helping it grow better. Okay, so another thing that I plan to plant in my garden is bok choy. Bok choy is like a leafy green cruciferous kind of put together. And it is amazing in stir fries. I don't really eat it fresh as much. It's usually like a quick stir fry or saute. You could also freeze the leaves. You could freeze the entire thing and use it in soups later on. Very similar to Swiss chard. And so just another tool to put in your tool belt, like for nutrition. When we are also talking about sulforaphanes, I plan to plant a purple cabbage. Now, you might be thinking in the back of your head, okay, you're talking about sulforaphanes, you're talking about cruciferous veggies. You've mentioned cauliflower and broccoli. How come you're not planting broccoli or cauliflower? Now, if you have the space, go ahead and plant broccoli and cauliflower. Excellent. I have planted broccoli, cauliflower, purple cauliflower before. It just takes up a ton of room for like one head of broccoli. It like will take up probably 2 by 2 feet in my garden, and I don't have that much to work with. And so I typically do not, after that 1 year, I just, it's great. It grows really well. I really didn't have too many pests that year. It's just, it takes up a lot of garden space for like eating it in one meal. And so if you have a lot of space, you have a huge garden where you can do rows and rows of these, that would be a really great one. Same thing with cauliflower, purple cauliflower as well. It's just, again, the space that it takes up. I have planted cabbage in the past, and cabbage was really good. I've planted the regular green cabbage, as well as last year I planted Napa cabbage. The Napa cabbage would have done really well had I harvested it on time. It's one of those things where it's like all good at the same time. And like as a busy mom, I'm just like, I don't want to harvest like 3 of these. We're only going to eat one this week. And then, of course, lo and behold, the bugs and probably the cabbage worms, they got to it. And so I think I had planted 6 of them. They don't take up as much space as cauliflower and broccoli. And they are delicious. I love Napa cabbage. Not as high in sulforaphane ability, and it's still really good as long as you harvest them on time. The cabbage was pretty good. Again, you need to harvest it. And if you are going to make your own sauerkraut or kimchi, that's an excellent time to like harvest it all at the same time. And make that. I personally have not made cabbage or I have not made sauerkraut myself. I wanted to um I wanted to try it a couple of years ago. However, we had a vacation where in the middle of the summer where I couldn't have like checked to make sure that it was like fermenting okay in the jar, and so I just didn't do it. But I mean, if you are wanting to make your own sauerkraut for additional probiotic benefits for gut health, that would be an excellent one to start with. And so those are the main plants that I am planting in my garden this year for optimized brain health. So anyway, what I am doing for my sanity's sake and for health, so that when I say sanity, I mean like I can't be planting things that require so much attention and care that, it's taking a long time. Like I already spend a good amount of time outside ensuring weeds are out of the way and things are being nurtured and watering it. I mean, as a busy mom, it's really hard to get out there. So I probably spend 5 to 10 minutes out there when I'm harvesting a little bit more. And especially I like to get my kids involved in the harvesting part. And so that's always fun. But so I don't have tons of time. And so when I talk about this garden layout, I'm really focused on ease, and I'm focused on foods that are going to be easy to process and easy to freeze, easy to eat, like what are my kids going to eat? What is my family going to eat? And so those are all the considerations that I make when I'm planning my garden. So bed one is going to have my leafy greens like the kale, the bok choy, the Swiss chard, and then I also have my lemon balm plant kind of taken over in there. And then I will probably plant right around my lemon balm some different herbs. And then in one of my beds, I didn't even talk about this today, but one of my beds I just have for pickling cucumbers. So I will probably save that space for that. I also grow dill so that I can make dill pickles. And so that bed will be for the pickles and zucchini. I also save about a half of a garden bed space for like 1 or 2 different tomato varieties. I'll freeze the tomatoes and I'll add it to soups, or I'll dice it ahead of time and I'll add it to soups. And then doing like immersion blender if needed, like if I was doing like a tomato based soup or something. And so, or curry. Actually, curry is like the main way in which I use my tomatoes. In bed too, I'll have cabbage. I'm going to do red or purple cabbage this year. I'm going to try that out. I've done the green. I've planted the Napa cabbage last year. And so this year I want to plant the purple cabbage because I don't think I mentioned this, but purple cabbage has a much higher sulforaphane content than green would. And the anthocyanins, certain pigment in that cabbage, is just a different sort of antioxidant to add different variety and colors to the garden, and really which it relates to the different antioxidants. And then raspberries will be outside of the beds because they're going to need more space and they're going to need a trellis. And so that's what I plan to do. Just a couple extra tips for Wisconsin Zone 5B. The last frost usually in mid-May, although it's usually end of May, let's be honest. So don't rush planting because you really don't want it to freeze and then kill everything that you planted. And so, but you also could use like cold frames or row covers or mulch for moisture retention. Is all like, work that I don't always want to put in. And so I'm kind of a lazy gardener. And so I want the easiest things I can grow where I can just go out and pick them and harvest. Yeah. And so what I tried to do is just plant things at the end of May. I have multiple times gotten so excited about gardening in the spring that I brought in containers into my house and like pre-planted stuff and watered them and got these little sprouts to grow. And it's like you miss one day. I had my son's birthday party in May and I missed one day of watering and they all wilted. It's like too much pressure to keep those things alive. And so what I tend to do is just grow those hardy things that you can just plant at the end of May and they will just pop up and you don't have to focus on transplanting, and they're super weak after you transplant them. So I just trying to focus on things that grow best, like at the end of May. So overall, that was a lot of information. But I am so excited about this optimized brain garden. I want to stock my freezers with the high nutrient dense foods that's going to feed myself and feed my family, even throughout the winter. Like, of course, we can feed ourselves in the summer with these foods, but a lot of them are super easy to freeze and easy to preserve for the remainder of the year. And so again, this isn't about growing everything. Oh my gosh, I talked about a lot of things today. It's about growing what heals you. So pick a couple things. If you're new to gardening, pick a couple of the things that we talked about today, the easiest things. Let me tell you, Swiss chard is super nutrient dense, super easy to grow. And so if you have just a small space to garden, go with a leafy green. It really doesn't need too much sun. Just like very shady areas with a little bit of sun is best. And those leafy greens are so amazing for brain health. And so start small. And you can build from season to season. Every year, add one or two different things, or stay where you're at, maintain, be consistent. So what I just love about this is your garden can be your calm. It can be your energy and also your clarity. And so I would love to hear from you guys. Well, if you love this episode, please screenshot it and just post it on Instagram and tag me at Wellness That Fits. I would also love to hear what you plan on growing in your garden this year. I'm always so interested to hear not only what people are growing, but what they actually do with the food that they grow. And tag me again at Wellness That Fits. And I hope and wish you have the best gardening season and growing season that you can. Thanks for listening. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode of the Wellness That Fits podcast. I hope you walk away with simple, doable steps you can put into practice right away. If you loved this episode, it would mean the world if you subscribed, left a review, or shared it with another busy mom who could use some encouragement. Until next time, friends, keep creating wellness that fits your life.